Welcome to Japan on Film Podcast. I am your host, Perry Constantine, and this is the third episode of the new season, and I'm bringing back another returning guest, and that's Ken from the Ongaku To You podcast. Ken, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to be back, honestly.
Yeah, it's good to have you back. We had a good time having you on last time, and we got another one of your co-hosts coming on in a few episodes as well, Jana.
Yeah, I heard she's looking forward to it.
Yeah, same here. We're going to be doing Jigoku for that episode, I believe, which I haven't seen in, God, like over 10 years probably.
Oh.
But anyway, today we're talking about Death Note, the 2006 live action adaptation of the manga. But before we get into that, how you been? Anything you want to announce? Anything you want to tell us about what's been going on with you?
Nothing really. I've been okay. We've been just going with doing our podcast, our music podcast, and exploring the news of the Japanese music industry. So that's been good. And when I'm not doing that, I'm actually on a gaming podcast as well called Podosaurus with another friend of mine. And we just did a episode about the so-called E3 roundup that Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft had the last couple of weeks.
Okay. Anything good news come out of that?
Well, the PS5 price and such like that, and then the Xbox Series S and things. But the big bombshell news that came out this past week was that Microsoft purchased Cinemax, so all of Bethesda studios and stuff like that. So we'll be talking about that probably the next episode.
Yeah, I literally just saw that. Just like literally like in the past hour, I just saw someone post that on Facebook. Which, yeah, I don't know what to make of that. I'm not a big Microsoft fan, especially after they completely screwed up Skype.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that doesn't mean like those games are going to become exclusive to Xbox, because that's.
Yeah, that's one thing that I'm very, very scared of that they're going to do it. However, they have let Minecraft go kind of freely, but
okay.
We'll see.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, yeah, I'll have to take a look at that. So what was the name of that podcast again?
It's called Podosaurus, so it's spelled, hold on, let me just pull it up right
because
here.
I tried doing a search and I came up with a bunch of dinosaur podcasts, so I'm not sure if I was doing it right.
Yeah, so the actual, like, if you look it up across all podcast streaming services, it is called Kyoryu Hunter, Kyoryu Hunter. It's because the domain name of Podosaurus was already used, so we couldn't use it.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah, I found it here now. Okay. All right, good. I'll have to check that out then.
Yes.
And we'll put a link to that up on the website later. Okay. Now, so as we mentioned, today we're talking the 2006 Death Note, which I believe was the first live action adaptation of the manga, right?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Now, my only experience with Death Note is this one movie. I haven't seen any of the.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so I haven't seen any of the other movies. I haven't seen any of the anime. I haven't read the manga. Nothing. So, how about you? What's your experience going into this?
So actually, I am a huge fan of Death Note. So I read the original manga when it came out in Japanese a long time ago. And then when it came into English, I was surprised, that they translated it into English. And then the anime was very well received. Madhouse, who's the animation studio, is an amazing animation studio. And they did justice to the series. Yeah. And it led up to this film, which I absolutely love. It's one of my favorite films of all time, to be perfectly honest.
Oh, okay. So, what about? So, how did you feel going into the movie? Like, were you nervous at all? Because I know in the West at least, anime fans start to get anime manga fans, they get nervous when this stuff gets live action adaptations, and I understand that there's it's not like, for example, the live action and manga and anime adaptations in Japan are kind of in the place where American comic book adaptations were about like maybe 10, 15 years ago, where it's kind of like hit or miss a lot.
Yeah. So I was skeptical about certain aspects of it going in because they created a new character for this movie that wasn't in the series, and we'll get more into that a little bit later. But I knew the actor Tatsuya Fujiwara from a bunch of dramas, and he actually became one of my favorite actors coming out of this film when I first initially watched it.
Yeah, I remember him from Battle Royale.
Yeah. He was amazing in that. And
yes,
my love for this actor grew overall. And then I watched Kenichi Matsuyama, who plays L in this movie, in another movie prior to his role. He was in the Nana movie as one of the bassists for that particular film. And the character that he plays in that film is tonally so much different than L. So I was very hesitant on how they were going to do L with this movie.
Yeah, I'm just looking over his filmography now. I don't think I've seen anything else with him, although I do see he was in he was in Norwegian Wood. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, that's where I recognized him from. But interesting little bit of trivia here is, according to my wife, he's married to Koyuki, who was the actress in The Last Samurai.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, again, this is just what my wife told me last night, and she's like, "Oh yeah, he's married to Koyuki from The Last Samurai." Like, so maybe she could be wrong. She could be wrong. Just fair warning if I got that wrong. But yeah, so it was nice to see him in that too. I was also really glad to see Yu Kashi in this, because I haven't really seen her in a lot, and I loved her in Linda, Linda, Linda.
Yeah. So she was interesting in this role. I really liked it, and I have some gripes with the character because of just how it was adapted from adding this new character, but the way that they approached this character overall actually kind of worked in its favor on how it was doing this film, and we can get into a little bit more of that later on.
I was also kind of surprised because this only came out a year after Linda, 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 but just like I don't know if it's just her performance or just the style of clothing or what it is, but she seems like she's 10 years more mature than she was in that movie.
Yeah. I was just going to talk about this. We just watched Linda, Linda, Linda in preparation for another thing.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, oh, this is very interesting that she was also in this movie.
Yeah.
Because she's so different in this movie compared to Linda, Linda, Linda.
Yeah. And that's what really impressed me. Like, she really impressed me in Linda, Linda, Linda. Her and I can't remember the Korean actress. I'm blanking on her name right now. But they were like the anchors of that movie, and they were both really good in that. And I talk more about that in way back in, I think it was like maybe the first or second season. I did a solo episode about Linda, Linda, Linda. So you can go back and listen to that if you're curious. Okay.
So,
now, also, Shido Nakamura does the voice of Ryuk, and he was in Letters from Iwo Jima.
Yeah.
Which kind of surprised me. I didn't even recognize that it was the same guy. It was the same voice from that movie. But although I gotta say, I kept laughing at the CGI.
Yeah. That's one thing with this movie. I was just like, oh yeah, it was really good, but the CGI, even back then when I first initially watched this movie, I was just like, that's very questionable at best.
Yeah. It was just so bad. And I was laughing at some of the close-ups on his nose where he's got, because it's like kind of like this skull-like face, and it's supposed to be like the nostril holes in the skull, but they look like they're painted on. Just because there's like no dimensionality to that. I just thought that was, and it was funny because I was watching this with my wife, and she's like, "Oh, he's scary." I'm like, "How do you think that's scary?" Okay, so where do you want to start with this? Like, really kind of jump in and talking about some of the stuff in this movie, because you're more the Death Note expert than I am.
So one of the things of this movie is I really liked about 90% of this movie. This movie is like I said earlier, this is one of my favorite films in Japanese cinema, and just because how closely and how skillfully they adapted a lot of the beats of the story from the first arc of the manga for this movie, and I thought it was really impressive that they were to do this. Let's see here. Takeshi Kaga was just amazing as Soichiro Yagami, the father.
Yes,
really
yeah,
loved
he was
him.
really good. Yeah.
And coming from watching Iron Chef when I was growing up, he was the chairman.
Oh, okay.
And going from that to this movie, I was just like, wait a minute, he looks super familiar. And I was like, oh no, it's the chairman from Iron Chef. And just having this such an imposing role, I really, really loved his take on the character for this movie.
All right, so that's a good place to. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No. Go ahead.
I was just gonna take it into a new direction. So if you wanted to have anything else you wanted to say about that, then finish up.
No.
Okay.
No, I'm pretty much done.
Okay. So speaking of the characters, how do the characters compare in the movie to the manga and to the anime?
So Light is pretty much 1-to-1, except that last third act.
Okay.
Where they kind of ramp up his idealistic thoughts into more of an extreme, and we can get more on that. L is more the same. Actually, he's 1-to-1 as well. He's actually well acted in this movie. Misa, as short-lived as she was in this movie, she felt her part. She's more important in the second movie, I would say. And Naomi, I have one big problem, but that is involving the third act.
Okay.
That is really, really hand in hand with the third act. Ryuk, how Shido Nakamura does this role is really good. I mean, he could only do so much, right, with just the voice here. And that's pretty much it. I mean, you have Rain also. Rain, they changed his name also. His name isn't Iwamatsu in the movie. It's Pembar because he's Japanese American.
Oh, I see.
Which is really so. But that, all in all, the short time that we get to spend with Rain is pretty much 1-to-1. His role was get to the bus and then do the train.
Now, you also mentioned that one of the characters was created for the movie who wasn't in the manga. Who was that?
So that was Shiori. It was Yukashi's character.
Oh, really? Okay. So she wasn't.
Yeah.
So did he have a love interest in the comic or no?
So not really. He was so set in his ways of finding his own way of justice that he flirts around with the idea of being with someone, but just to be used as a tool kind of thing for his own personal gain. So the whole date of the bus was a totally different girl. The ending with the third act with Naomi, her, and Light is totally different. And yeah, she does her role very well, but I just had a little problem with just how she was implemented in that final act.
Okay, well, let's go into more depth because me not having the experience of the manga, all I have is the experience of the movie, which I thought, at least it, again, coming to this, having never read the manga or anything, I thought it worked pretty well in that sense. If you don't have that familiarity with it, because it works as a useful way to show just how fast, because obviously in the manga you've got more time to space out his descent into psychopathy. Whereas in this you've only got what a 2-hour runtime, I think. So you have to have some way to show the contrast of how he's changing. And we see him with Shiori throughout the movie, and we can tell that it's not just kind of like a fling or anything like that. Like, he really does care about this woman. He really does love her. So that when we get to the end and we find out that, and he tells Ryuk that, no, I'm the one who killed her. I wrote this down in the book. And then like Ryuk has that surprise in his face. And, credit to Nakamura. He does a really good job performing that case when he says, like, you've got a devil inside you, or something along those lines, like that.
Yeah.
And that it is stunning in that moment to kind of feel that. So I thought it worked really well in that sense. But you tell me about it, coming at it from the point of view of having read the manga.
So having read the manga, Shiori's role was really, really good because like you said, they had to truncate his descent much more faster compared to the manga and the anime. So her role was actually really good. It's the conflict between her and Naomi was the only thing I had a problem. So
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Naomi's character is really, really smart, and she's almost on the pace of L as in strategic placing of how she handles people, especially after the death of Ray. She was like, oh, Ray must have had the badge out, gave the real name and stuff like that, so I'm not going to do that. There's a huge set piece of her trying to go see Elf in person, and Light meets her, and they have pretty much a game of cat and mouse of who's going to blink first and who is going to admit, is this L or is this Kira, or who's this person's real name and things like that. And Light traps her and kind of gets her to confess. Unlike in the movie, where she just straight out says, hey, you're going to have a tough time killing me because that's not my real name.
Right, yeah.
Kind of thing. And I was like, that's so stupid.
Yeah, it did seem to come... you're right, that did kind of feel like a bit of plot contrivance. Like, they just needed the characters to get to this place, and they didn't have enough time to kind of do it properly. So, you're right, that did kind of feel like a bit of a plot contrivance.
Yeah, so then the whole thing leads to the art museum, which is a really, really intricate and step-by-step set piece that they ended up pulling off really well. But the fact that I kept on thinking, Naomi's so stupid for revealing her name in that point, or revealing that that's not her real name, then that it took me out of it. But
I was thinking the same thing rewatching it last night. I also had that same feeling. I'm like, why are you going to tell him that he's got the wrong name? Because you're completely showing your hand there. Yeah.
So that was one thing that I was just like, it took me out of it, and I couldn't get over that fact. After that, thinking down, because it's been a few years since I watched this movie, and when I rewatched it, I was just like, I used to really hate Shiori as a character, but her role of how fast that she can be used as a tool for his expense was just, it clicks very much on all cylinders, and it shows how Light's just he'll use anyone, and it goes into the second movie that he'll use anyone to get his purpose. So that was one thing that I really did like about a character. It was just that whole contrivance of the third act really, really upset me.
The movie does feel like the third act is a little bit weak because of those things. And I do remember wondering, I'm like, what it did feel a little. You're right. It does feel a little bit sloppy in some in those parts there. But one of the things I did want to talk about is, and something else that took me out of the movie as well was when Ray says he's an FBI agent. I was watching it last night. I'm like, wait a minute, what is the FBI doing in Japan? Japan doesn't have an FBI, and we find out they are actually agents sent over from the U.S., except the Japanese government has no knowledge of it. So that kind of took me out of it, just like the bureaucratic angles. Like, no way in hell would any government really just let the FBI waltz in and operate in their jurisdiction without any sort of clearance or anything or approval.
So this was one thing that the manga kind of goes into detail, because they talk about how Light's father, Soichiro, and Matsuda, one of the minor characters in the world, the guy that kind of talks out a lot during the meetings.
Right, yeah.
They're part of Interpol. So they're Japan's representative of Interpol, and Interpol was having this huge case, and it wasn't just the Japan police department or the Tokyo police department handling the Kida case. It was all of Interpol, and Interpol brought in the FBI.
That makes a lot more sense, because that wasn't really explained well in the movie, because the first time we're introduced to them, we see them at the National Police Agency, And then there is a reference to Interpol very briefly in that meeting with the fake L, but that's it. And there's like never anything else after that.
Yeah.
And especially with also with him talking to the I don't know, the commissioner or whoever it was, the minister, whatever, I can't remember who it was exactly, and the government official who says that, you know, we didn't know any of this, it came right out of the blue. That also struck me as odd as well.
Yeah, I thought that was very odd, and I was just like, oh, no, they knew about the FBI's involvement.
Yeah, that would have made a lot more sense.
It was through L that they let the FBI in, though. Mm-hmm. So it was on the request of L.
That which would have been fine. I just wish they would have made that a little bit more clear. Like that, and that whole scene could have really cleared it all up. They could have just said, you know, L asked us to agree to bring in the FBI and to do it in secret, to have like to conduct his own investigation or something along those lines. I think it would have made a lot more sense.
Yeah.
Instead, I think they were trying to I think they were a little bit too intent on trying to portray L as, you know, kind of doing his own thing. And that's where they had it, which makes sense, I guess, from a storytelling point of view, but just from the bureaucratic point of view, it just doesn't work at all. Mm. And that took some odd, we're talking realism in a movie with, you know, a floating death god, but
yeah.
But still, like that little bit took a little bit of the realism out of it for me.
Yeah. If you think of it as a political standpoint, it is kind of weird that they did that.
Yeah. Okay. Now, something else I thought was really cool about this, and something I've learned more about, because the last time I saw this movie was actually before I came to Japan. So since coming here and since learning about the Japanese legal system and all that scene where he hacks into the police agency and he sees all these cases that are, you know, being left unsolved or intentionally dismissed and all that makes so much more sense in light of what I've learned about the Japanese criminal justice system, because, you know, Japan is internationally renowned. It's something they tout all the time as having a 99% conviction rate, having such a low rate of crime. But the reality is that there's some number fudging going on there. So, like a lot of times, prosecutors are under so much pressure to get a conviction that unless they have a signed confession or they have like a bulletproof case, 9 times out of 10 they won't pursue charges against someone, because unless they have that hard case facts, they won't pursue charges. Also, when it comes to crime reporting, a lot of crimes are underreported because of that pressure to keep the high conviction rates and keep the crime rate low. So, for example, there are a lot of mysterious deaths that are just ruled as suicide, even though they may not be. Same thing with, like, you know, missing person cases end up just being written up as runaways or something like that, as opposed to kidnappings. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on where they kind of pick and choose what kind of cases they go after. And also when it comes to organized crime stuff as well, like in the US, they've got the RICO statute where they can use that to take down criminal organizations. But Japan has no RICO situation. They've got no equivalent law, which is why a lot of like the top Yakuza guys end up going unpunished. There's no way to really go after them like there is in the US. So I thought all of that was pretty interesting, and, you know, coming at it from that point of view and having it be like in some way an indictment of the criminal justice system in Japan. I really like that part of the movie as well.
Yeah. So like it was very interesting that they did that to kind of shine a little bit more light about it. Mm-hmm. And the manga kind of does that a lot too, where he's saying, he like flats out kind of similarly explains what you just told me, or just to explain to me, fairly similar in that way that, you know, hey, unless they can get that booking, they're not gonna even try, or they're gonna fudge a little something here and there, and that the world is rotten because of it. And that's what kind of makes his way of justice so much more better in his world, or in his mind.
Right, yeah, because he feels like, he's not getting mired in the red tape or the politics of all. He's just doing what needs to be done, type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, good. Now about Light's descent, I really liked the way they handled it. I thought it was, that is a good way to transition into that part of the movie, and how they handle that transition to him going from, someone who's very idealistic and who believes in justice and doing the right thing, and little by little he starts making these compromises, right?
Yeah.
Like when he's looking up the names of when he's trying to find out the names of the FBI agents, and Ryuk even says to him, these guys aren't criminals, and I can't remember if he actually does justify it in vocally out loud, but there is also like this. There is this kind of even if they don't, I can't remember if they do or don't, but even if they don't, you do kind of get this sense that, well, it's like, well, look, I have to do this in order to keep punishing people who deserve punishment.
Yeah.
And just seeing like how he goes from, sort of using these skills and kind of twisting and making these compromises one after the other until he gets to this point where he's, slaughtering like almost a dozen FBI agents. Yeah.
So it was interesting how the movie tackled that. Mm-hmm. And it's fairly similar to the manga, to be perfectly honest. Like, he makes little compromises here and there. He even thinks about, like, hey, I'm never going to use this against my father unless he stands in my way, kind of thing. Because if someone stands in my world of justice, they're going to get slopped down. And if it's innocent or criminal, if you're in my way, I'm going to take you down.
Right.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that was one thing that I did like seeing in the movie a whole lot more, because having that physical representation is always very exciting. Mm-hmm. And there was one thing too in the movie. It's like fairly early in the beginning how they're showing the kidnapping or the rat. I think it's a hostage situation. It's like fairly early in the movie, and he brazenly just takes out the notebook in public and writes the name just right there. And then I'm just like, I mean, I'm pretty sure everyone's paying attention to the television, but it would be kind of weird. Just like you look down, you see some guy writing names in books.
He also does that like, when he goes after the murderer, right?
Yeah.
Right in front of the train tracks.
Yeah. So that's he does that fairly differently in the manga. The manga, he actually hides it in front of a Shonen Jump magazine, which is really funny because Shonen Jump was the original publishing for this series. So he hides in there and he writes it a bunch of times, like car accident a bunch of times. And the way he uses the book in the manga compared to the live action is also kind of interesting.
Okay, so in what ways?
He writes a lot more names, and it's physically shown that he writes a lot more names than he does in the movie, where he looks like he's using like maybe 12 names, if that, on a one-side sheet of paper. He's writing like 6 by 4 lines worth of people just down in the manga.
Oh, wow.
And then the introduction of Ryuk in the manga, he was actually surprised that a human is writing that many names in the book, because usually some people are very scared because the rules are very, very daunting. And if you use the book, if you die, you're not going to heaven or hell. You're going to someplace much worse. And they don't explain that in the movie.
Yeah, that is not touched on at all in the movie whatsoever.
And how Light approaches that, he goes, well, no one's going to kill me. No one's going to find me.
Right.
So it's not going to matter. Kind of thing. And he actually isn't surprised when he meets Ryuk in the manga. He's just like, well, there must be something kind of tying this book to the world. and I guess that's you kind of thing, compared to the movie where he was kind of surprised initially seeing a god of death kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, also in that scene where he finds the Death Note, and it did strike me as being a little bit coincidental in the movie. He's just found out that this murderer got free. He's disillusioned. He throws his law book away, and he just happens to stumble on the Death Note notebook at that point. I thought that was a little coincidental. Is that the same thing as it happens in the manga?
No, he straight out says, "No, I just dropped it because I was bored." Ryuk straight out says it, like saying, "I didn't choose you. You're not some special person because of your intellect or your wit. I just dropped it in a place where I thought it would be interesting."
Okay,
and the rules are in English for that reason.
Oh, okay. But my question is about Light stumbling on the book. Like, does it have that same kind of coincidental nature where he just encounters the freed murderer, and then he's disillusioned, and at that moment he finds it?
No, so what's very interesting compared to the movie and the manga, Light is still in high school, and he finds it in his schoolyard. It's dropped in his schoolyard, and he just so happens to see something fall. No one picked it up around that time, so he picked it up instead, and he thought it was like those chain letter kind of things.
Right. Yeah.
And initially he didn't believe it, and then he tested it out on a random no-name criminal.
I see. Okay. All right. So that's interesting. So they had so I'm guessing then that they didn't have that whole backstory of him, hacking into the National Police Agency before he found the notebook.
No, he did. He because
he
knows that the world is rotten because of how justice is. It's just that he can't do anything about it.
I see. Okay. That's interesting that he was in high school in the original, where here he seems like ready to graduate college and move on to law school.
Yeah, so it's how the ending of that and how Light first meets L is also very interesting because in the series there's this male idol. His name is Ryuzaki. So L uses that name, and then a lot of people instantly think of the idol. So he chose that name for a purpose, and he straight out tells Light during a college Nuinshiki.
Okay, yeah, like a entrance ceremony, yeah.
Entrance ceremony. Yeah, sorry. They first meet each other doing the exam, and he noticed how intensely L was staring at Light because he knew something was off. And then they both got perfect scores on the ceremony or on the test, and they had to do the ceremony speech and stuff like that. And he straight out tells him, "Hey, my name is Ryuzaki, but I'm also L." As a test to be like, hey, if you write my name of Ryuzaki, you're going to think of the idol and you're going to kill him instead.
I see. Right. Yeah.
So the game of cat and mouse was very interesting, and it kind of goes in that in the second part. But the introduction of him saying straight out, "I'm L," it doesn't have that same 1-2 punch as it does in the manga.
Right. Yeah. I can see that. Because when he tells, I'll be Ryuzaki, it just seems kind of tacked on when he does it in the movie.
Yeah.
I was kind of thinking like, well, nobody cares what your real name is. All these people are working with you, or what your fake name is going to be. All these people are working with you anyway. So, but on L, I thought he was a really interesting character, and one of the things I liked about Matsuyama's performance is just like the little physical things he does, like the way he sits on the chairs, almost like he's perching like a bird or something like that. And something else I thought was interesting was the way he's so obsessed with eating sweets. Is that also something from the manga?
Yes, everything was taken from the manga, and Matsuyama did it perfectly. Just the little minute details of his character, just him biting down on his thumb, him adding all the sweets, perched up, looking just so like deadpan and just intentionally at what he needs to gather from all his information and stuff like that was acted out very, very well. And I applaud Matsuyama for that.
Yeah. Do they ever explain any of those little quirks in the manga?
They kind of do, but it's not explained in the movies.
Right.
It's only explained in the manga.
Okay. What about the anime? Is it done in the explained in the anime as well, or no?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Let's see where I wanted to jump to next on this. I also thought that one of the interesting things was in the beginning how he's also killing like one of the foreign minister, I think it was, or something like that.
Yeah.
So I that and it was funny. My wife asked me, she's like, if you had that notebook, who would you use it? And I said yes. And she's like, who would you use it on? I'm like, well, let's say there's Trump, there's Suga, there's all these.
there's various interesting people that is doing the world a lot worse.
I asked her, would you use it? And she's like, no. And I'm like, okay, well, you're a better person than I am.
What's very, very, very interesting that you bring this up. So this is kind of going away from the film just a bit.
That's okay.
So the manga had a one-shot released earlier in the year. And it was basically brought to modern times from when the manga ended to now. So, and it introduced the Death Note again. And instead of this Kira using it as a tool himself, he used it as a weapon of mass destruction. So basically, he went on Twitter and said, "Hey, I am Kira. I have the Death Note. I want $10 billion for this, and I will give it to whoever wants it."
Oh, wow.
And what's very interesting about that is a certain president is in this. They don't say who it is, but it obviously looks like a certain president.
I'll have to check that out. I'm gonna have to look up the manga now.
And just the scene of Ryuk almost handing that president the Death Note was just so abnormal, and I just couldn't stop laughing when I first read it.
Oh my god! I just looked it up on. Wow. They are not trying to hide that at all.
They don't say his name, but they obviously just say president, and then
it's very obvious who they're talking about.
It's very, very interesting how they do that. And then they also have a bidding war between the US and then the North Korea, which is also but they also introduce a new rule in that, which kind of ties up a loose end there. So but
I have to check this manga out now.
But yeah, going back to the movie, I want to hear your thoughts about the train set piece.
Okay.
So
when he was on the train with Ray, you mean?
Yes. So how did you like that set piece overall? Because this set piece, when I was looking into it, was probably the most expensive part of this movie. Oh,
that's interesting. I mean, I guess it makes sense because because there were so many people on that train, right? It was completely packed, and it looks. That is kind of surprising because I've seen other Japanese movies with stuff happening on a train. So that's interesting. I didn't really think anything about it. It just seemed like a regular Japanese train scene.
Yeah, because when they first, I was remembering looking up news for this because I was wondering how are they going to do the train, because in the manga they don't use it's not a Chikatetsu, it's the Yamanote line.
Okay, yeah.
So obviously they can't use the Yamanote line,
right,
which is the most popular line in Tokyo, for if you guys don't know.
Yeah,
so they use this.
It's ridiculously crowded.
Yeah, so they use the Chikatetsu, the subway trains instead. Right. And they supposedly charted this entire line and had 500 extras for this particular scene.
Wow, that's interesting. I mean, yeah, I guess most of them, I'd imagine, most train scenes are probably done on closed sets or something like that, like using like trick photography. So that's very interesting. I mean, I wasn't really paying any special attention to it. It didn't seem any different from, like the scenes in Train Man, for example, or
for Denchan Toka or anything like that.
It didn't seem like anything different about it. So I'd be interested in finding out like how that compares to other Japanese movies that were filmed on trains. Like, did those other movies also charter lines, or did they do it in like more rural areas or whatever to save on costs or anything like that? That's interesting. I have no idea.
Yeah, so like this was the first time, I believe it was the first time in Japanese film history that they used the underground line, and that's why it was so kind of like all the news was talking about it. So I was just like, when I was looking up news about this, I was like, how in the world are they going to do the train scene? And I found my answer. I was just like, oh, they just chartered a whole part of this entire line and just to do it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm actually trying to see if I can find anything about it on the Japan Times.
Yeah, so it's one of my favorite scenes because of just not even thinking of just how they shot it and stuff like that, because basically he sent Ray to die. And all the members of the FBI agents to die in this whole way. And then if you read the manga pretty much says whoever uses this book doesn't go to heaven or hell. Right. So does that mean Ray didn't go to heaven or hell? Because technically he used the book.
Oh, you're right. That's a good point. I hadn't even thought about that. But yeah, I guess I didn't even realize that because when I was watching, because they don't, obviously, like we said, they don't mention that that
particular rule. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I didn't even think about it, but it didn't even occur to me when you told me about it that Ray technically uses the book too.
Yeah, that's kind of damning him. Kind of.
Well, I do wonder if it's because also there are a few times, right, when he like hands out pieces of paper, and he asks people. So so there are a few times when stuff like that happens. So I wonder if it has to be you intentionally using the book.
I guess. Yeah, they didn't really clear up that, but like one of the things was just like, oh, so Ray wrote down the book, and I'm like, oh, so something must have happened with him.
So did they do that in the manga too? Did he also end up writing the names directly in the book himself without realizing it? Okay.
The scene was 1-to-1.
Okay.
1-to-1. But the thing of Naomi being there wasn't true.
Okay. Yeah, I thought that was also a little bit of a contrivance with how he finds out that where they were getting married, like he sees the envelope from the distance like that. Yeah. And in just like that brief split second, he's able to remember it and then go down there. I thought that was also a little tacked on when they got to that point in the movie.
Excuse me. Yeah. Yeah, no, it was very like the whole thing of how they handled Naomi was something weird.
Yeah, I kind of got there was this weird sense that something about her just felt off throughout the whole movie. Like, I get that they're trying to, because when we first meet her, she just seems like, a regular fiance, right? There doesn't seem anything strange. And when he, until Ray mentions that, she used to go on missions for light. And then when she gets off on the train and she starts going into doing the investigation herself, like, we kind of get hints of something more of her, but it never seems to. She's always played up by other people as being like this great investigator that I don't think her own actions ever sort of really meet up to the expectations that were set.
Yeah. So that's kind of similar. She is but she in the manga, she does her own thing and she doesn't leave any kind of slip ups until she gets kind of checkmate in that one scene of hers in the manga. But there's another part where she mentions about this thing called the Los Angeles BB cases, and it's a other part of it's like a light novel that was going on around the time the manga came out.
Mhm.
And actually goes more into depth about Naomi and her meeting like face to face. She was the only other person that isn't related to Watari
Mhm.
to have met her during that time.
Okay.
And that's why in the film he's so easily trusting to grab the phone and say, "Hello, yeah, okay, I trust you. I'll watch what's going on for that third act."
Okay.
So it's kind of interesting that you kind of mentioned that, because me and all my friends, we read the manga and we watched the anime, so we kind of know that one thing. It's like leading on to be like, oh yeah, okay, so yeah, obviously he trusts his Naomi because of the stuff in the BB cases. But if you haven't read that, or you haven't read the original material, you're kind of just left in the dark, like, why is she important?
Yeah,
how is it?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So it's very interesting that I get to talk to you like this about that.
Yeah, this is an interesting conversation because I can learn a little bit more about the manga, and also coming to it from both our different points of view, with you having read, all this stuff about Death Note and, having been a fan of it going in, and me, coming into it completely blind. And us still, like, even with the, the stuff that we have different points of view on it, but still generally overall, we kind of have the same impressions on a lot of things, which is kind of interesting how that works out.
Yeah, so like there's the train scene. My favorite scene overall was the train scene, but that was because of I was always wondering how they were going to pull it off from reading the manga and learning about this film, and then just the cost of everything else. Is there any other scenes that you found impressionable to you?
I did like the train scene, and just kind of like I think it did a really good job. Also, just like the composition of it is really nice, with light kind of standing over at him, but from a distance, and just like there was just something about it that it really starts to establish how far Light's really willing to go. And I think these are like the first, because when when Ray first comes to him, there's not that kind of sense of animosity.
Yeah.
Right. He does seem like, it seems more like, look, I'm gonna trick this guy into leaving me alone, but I'm not gonna kill him. And that goes so quickly into, well, I got to get rid of this guy. Yeah,
pretty much. As soon as he saw FBI, he's just like, yeah, unfortunately, if the FBI is involved, I have to get rid of them, because they're impeding on my sense of my world, so to speak.
I didn't even think about, I was just too taken out of the movie by the fact that what are the FBI doing in Japan?
Yeah, no, it's very interesting that happens.
Because I was sitting there and I was talking to my wife. I'm like, why are the FBI in Japan? I don't get this. Like, I spent like a good 5 minutes ranting about that part.
Well, one other thing that I did really like about this movie is just the whole lead up of, like we talked about earlier, just the lead up of Light's descent into madness from this movie, because it's very interesting how they tonally took it, especially with Shiori.
Yeah.
Especially with Shiori. And in the second movie, it kind of loses that 1-2 punch, so to speak. And that's because they kind of went off the rails of how they wanted to change the ending. Because the ending is tonally different from the second movie on.
I see.
So it's
yeah,
it's
I was
very
reading
interesting.
that well, I think it was L Change the World. That was like almost a completely original story or something.
Yeah, it's completely non-canon because of what happens in that particular story. So it's
also just on another note, just like Hikari Mitsushima, who plays Light's sister, Sayu. So like, I'm not really familiar with her, but but my wife pointed out, oh, she's huge. She's all these different movies and stuff, and and so I looked her up, and I actually haven't seen any movie that she's been in, so I was kind of surprised by that.
So she's one of my favorite actresses as well, and I totally forgot that she was in the movie. And just after this, I was just like, "Oh, Hikari's in this movie," kind of thing. And
one of the things I liked about her was just like how expressive she is. Like the scenes when their dad's talking and she's like she goes through like 20 different facial expressions in just that one conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, how the characters are written in this pretty much are kind of one-to-one. Sayu is very, very energetic and expressive in the manga and the anime. It's funny because I watched the anime just to kind of be like, okay, I need to kind of compare it in my mind, so to speak, a little bit more recently, because I haven't watched the anime in like years also. So watching the movie and then kind of watching the animes up to the ending of where the movie is was very interesting, and just shows how like they adapted several of the characters fairly well as one-to-one counterparts to the original work, and Sayu is a part of that.
Also, I'm looking here, and it says that Ai Maida was in this movie as well, and she played Ayako Yoshino, who I don't remember who that is in the movie.
She's a one-off character. She's like a background character.
Okay.
It was very interesting that I was looking that up too. I was like, I might have. What? She was in this movie?
Yeah, because I did not remember seeing her, and then I just tried looking it up right now, and I can't seem to find it.
Yeah,
so I do not remember
it was
her
like
part
one of the background characters.
Wow, that's really interesting. They just threw her in randomly in some tiny cameo that nobody remembers.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. I did like how he threw off the video cameras, the surveillance cameras.
Yeah. So this scene is very infamous in the anime.
Okay.
And I'm very surprised they did. I'm surprised, and yet I'm kind of glad that they didn't ham it up in the movie. So if you guys don't know what we're talking about, during this time, the house is under watch because his family is under surveillance because they're one of the main suspects for this case.
Right, because they know information that only the chief can know.
Yeah. So they bugged his entire house with cameras and microphones and made sure that there was no blind spots. So how Light kind of goes around this is he buys potato chips and a mini, like, I guess how they changed it in this one is a cell phone that kind of has television capabilities, but
it looked kind of big for a cell phone. It seemed like one of those mini TV things.
Yeah, it was like a mini TV in the series. It looked a little bigger from there, but yeah. So he has a mini TV and then a piece of the Death Note along with a pen inside, taped up to the bag. And while he's studying in one hand, he takes a potato chip and kind of eats it and kind of pays attention and writes it one-handedly. Whoever's newly criminalized or arrested, and he kind of kills him using the Death Note.
Right, because the whole thing is for like the Death Note doesn't only kill people instantly, but it lets you specify like the circumstances surrounding their death and even their time of death. So so they figure that well, while we're watching him, if someone dies, that doesn't prove anything because they can do it in advance. But if someone gets charged with a crime and then while we're surveilling him and then he dies, then that shows that he's then that will show that he's not the guy, which is exactly how he kind of works it out.
Yeah. So one of the scenes in the manga anime is he goes, "Oh, I'm writing and studying in one hand, while in the other hand I take a potato chip and eat it." It's very, very infamous on the internet and stuff like that for anyone that really loves the culture for this series, because how Madhouse animates it's just they crank it up to 12 on how they animate it and how crazy he kind of goes into it. So I'm kind of happy that they didn't do that here, and they kind of just left it as a solid pan up to the revelation of what's going on kind of thing.
Yeah, I thought it was handled really nicely.
Yeah, and the fact that Elle didn't buy it at all, with just holding the same flavor of potato chips was very interesting.
Yeah. I like that. I like that little part at the end. Oh, so something else too, because like you said, he's Light's a high school student in the comic. Is there also this thing at the end of the movie where he ends up joining the task force?
Yes.
Okay.
Because he helped out his father with several difficult cases beforehand. So that's why originally the task force was like, yeah, bring in Light, because he's he's brilliant, and he helped us with cases that were difficult for even us to crack in the past. So we trust him to kind of handle this.
Okay. Yeah, that I think it rings a little bit better in the movie with him being because even in the movie it's still kind of stretching the limits of believability when he's when you're asking someone who hasn't even passed the bar exam yet to come in to consult on cases, but it makes a little bit more sense than if he's a high school student. Then it feels a little bit more incredulous.
Yeah.
But that's also kind of like that's a feature of manga and anime as well. Like, like the super that's a very common trope, right? Where like there's some super smart kid who ends up helping the cops with stuff like that.
Yeah, so that's why like aging him up in the movie kind of backfires in my point of view.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, because I believe that because they mentioned that a lot of times, saying that he's brilliant, he's very smart, he's studious. They did it sprinkle in a couple of times in the movie, saying that he's a very smart kid. He already he's going past the bar kind of thing. But they really hammer home in the manga that he's above all. Above all else, to the point that he could be thinking about something, he gets asked on, and then he still was like, yeah, I know what you're talking about, and kind of thing. He can kind of focus and handle things very much so on a scale of 10.
Okay. I thought it worked really well in the movie. I think they gave, at least from my perspective, having, again, not having seen read the book, that it seemed, I think they gave you just enough, right? They mentioned that his dad meant, because there's that one scene where he tells his dad, I want to help you, track down Kita. And his dad says, look, I know you've helped us before and you've got a brilliant mind, but this one we've got to handle on our, like this one, this is too much. And then later when Light tells him, or when Elle tells him, we need your brilliant mind to help us. Like it rang pretty true in the movie. Like I think they gave you just enough of people saying that, and then when you factor in his own actions as well, you kind of see it in action. So I think those two sides, it worked to give you just enough you needed to know to kind of understand like how smart he is.
Yeah, and it kind of brings up the fact that they had to truncate a lot of this. And the second movie kind of goes into the part where Light wins Elle over. Instead of kind of how they did it in the movie. They kind of have a back and forth kind of thing, saying, I don't trust you kind of thing. And they eventually helps out because of what happens in the second movie. Okay. Or the second part.
Okay. All right. Let's see. So just briefly, without, spoiling anything because I haven't seen it yet, what were your thoughts on the second one then?
The second one, it's interesting. And about halfway through the movie, they handled the similar beats kind of like the first one. Okay. Where the plot points are beat for beat, very similar. The characterization and how they pull it off is handled beautifully until you get to the ending part where they kind of take it on a different rail, so to speak, and kind of change it just a tiny bit, and which leads to the ending of the movie.
Okay. Yeah, and one of the things I see now that, it's because this plot line gets picked up in the second movie, but I thought the stuff with Misa in this movie just felt completely out of place. It just...
Yeah, it's basically fan service to be like, okay, hey, how they filmed this. I think they filmed it back to back.
Yeah, probably.
So when they did have Toda Erika as Misa, they were like, well, we should kind of introduce her just a little bit more, instead of just shoving her in randomly in the second movie, which they kind of do. They hint about that, but the brazen advertisement that they do on the bus and then on the television scene was very on the nose, so to speak.
Oh, wow. I mean, these came out, these had to have been filmed back to back, because the first one came out in June 2006, and the second one came out in October of the same year.
Yeah.
So yeah, they had to be filmed back to back.
If you do watch the second movie, I would love to talk to you about that again. And I want you to take note that Ryuk was staring at Misa for a certain reason.
Okay.
It's kind of picked upon the second movie, but there was one scene that I thought was very interesting that kind of linked Misa's character arc and kind of be like, hey, yeah, we're giving you little sprinkles of what the Shinigamis can do and what Misa's character arc is going to handle from the second movie.
Okay.
So that one little scene of just Ryuk staring at her was very, very interesting. And if you do watch the second movie, I want you to kind of think about that one particular scene. And they kind of hint it at the end of the movie, but the reason why that happens is very interesting.
Okay, now this movie also has there was another live action movie, which was
oh boy.
You know where I'm going. The Netflix version of this. So it sounds like you've got some thoughts.
So I watched it. I watched it, and unfortunately I watched it. And I'll tell you something about Netflix releases here. So because I live in Honolulu, we get things a little bit earlier compared to when it drops at midnight Eastern Standard Time.
Okay.
Or Western Standard Time. It drops a little bit early. So
so you basically get it like the night before because of the time difference.
Yeah, so it drops here at 9 p.m. 9 or 10, just depending on when they decide to drop it. I was up, so I was like, you know what? I'll watch it. And never before have I regretted not sleeping that night. I want to hear your thoughts.
I haven't seen it at all, actually. So that's why I was curious to hear what you had to say about it.
So, how they did Ryuk, Willem Dafoe does an absolutely amazing character work and performance with this role. Yeah, when they announced that Willem Dafoe was going to be in it, that gave me reason to think, you know, oh, this sounds like it might be good. Everyone else is a solid 6 out of 10, in my personal opinion, and just the random adness of certain rules for this was just out of the norm. Okay. In my personal opinion. Yeah, and also, I mean, it's funny, like, just Willem Dafoe's face even kind of looks like Ryuk. Yeah, I just picture that one scene of him nodding in Spider-Man, just that one smile scene that he has. I was like, yeah, that works for Ryuk. Yeah, I can kind of see that. I mean, you don't even need to go CGI. You can just slap on some white makeup on him and let him go to town. Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting that you brought that up, and I want to hear your thoughts, because this isn't the first time this series took live action. The films have its own universe kind of thing, and it kind of leads off into everything, because there was a latest one that happened a couple of years ago that it's called Light Up the New World, which is like Saved by the Bell, the next generation. Yeah, it's based on it's like a
came after it's based on like the same characters from the New Generation web series.
Yeah, and no, it was interesting. And they also have a live action television series, which at points did kind of stick close to the manga, yet change significant parts of the manga as well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I saw there was the 2015 TV series. Just checking right now. So yeah, it had 11 episodes, and yeah, it looks like it was just one season.
Yeah, because supposedly they were going to lead into a movie, and that's how they were going to end it with the grand finale kind of thing. But I guess the television show didn't end up doing so well that.
Okay.
That,
did you watch that TV show?
Yes, I watched the television show, and it was very interesting. Like they changed lights. Well, they changed Misa's personality a bit more. The introduction of Misa to Light a little bit differently, and then they introduced a different character named Mello, who's in the manga, but they introduced him so much sooner than what the manga had.
Okay,
and he's basically Light's successor.
Yeah. I see a young man with
series.
Split personality.
Yeah, so it was very interesting for that.
Okay, all right. Well, that's I'll have to check out some of this other stuff now. I've been hearing about Death Note obviously for years because it became really big in the West even before I came out here, and then obviously here, people love it as well. So. But all I'd ever seen was this movie. So, but now I'm curious now to check out some of this other stuff. You've definitely got me interested in taking a deeper look into some of this.
Yeah, like I said, I would love to hear your take on the sequel, The Last Name, and I would love to come back and kind of talk to you about it because how they ended it was very interesting, and I would like to kind of compare notes, so to speak, on how you felt if it was a nice bow tie towards the ending or not.
Okay, yeah, I'll have to see if I can track it down, and then we can have you back on to talk about that.
Yeah, most definitely.
Okay, Ken, well, it was great having you back on the show. It was a lot of fun talking about Death Note and getting the perspective of this from someone who is familiar with the manga going in and all the other, and getting your impressions, just kind of briefly on some of the other adaptations. So thanks so much for coming on again.
Oh, no, thanks for having me on. It's been a blast, and I've enjoyed both episodes that I've been on.
Okay, great, yeah.
I would love to come back on if you do the sequel.
Yeah, we'll definitely try to do that. Okay, so that does it for this episode of Japan on Film. Our next episode, we're going to be talking about Marabito, the horror movie made by the director of Ju-on, made kind of between the Japanese versions and the American versions. He made this small little horror film. So that's what we're going to be talking about in the next episode. So we'll do that next time. In the meantime, thanks so much for watching. You can go over to Japan on Film, find our Facebook group, join in the community, join in the discussions, and yeah, we'll talk to you next time. Bye for now. Thanks for watching this episode of Japan on Film. For more of our videos, just hit the subscribe button.